What I realize now is when I was 18, I had no concept of what it would mean to go to a school that costs more and what I would end up paying when I graduate.
Is it true that you were going to announce the gay marriage thing on this show?
It was a possibility. It was. We had been discussing it for a few weeks.
Couldn't let pride stand in my way of warning other people, to not drive and text or walk and text. It can be dangerous.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you so much for joining us this Tuesday evening, May 15th. Obviously got a lot to cover this hour, but first, with graduation season upon us, we're going to take a look at the cost of college. And with costs so high, some ask if it's still worth it. And next, the female vote. Huge change here in the polls. If you believe the numbers, Romney now actually ahead of President Obama in that demographic. We're going to break the numbers down and what could be the reasons behind the possible shift. And later, same-sex marriage. President Obama appearing on The View today and clarifying his position, but the question remains, was his support purely political or a real personal shift? And then, is Facebook a fad? Well, if you look at the polls, you have a very conflicted public on that. With Facebook's IPO upon us, a lot of you at home seem to say, hey, it's here today, maybe it'll be gone tomorrow. But first, before we get into any of those issues, let me bring in Andrew Whitman, and he's in first position with the very latest when it comes to college debt.
Well, Richie, it is, of course, college commencement season across the country at universities and colleges alike. And graduates and their parents now facing the tough reality that when the celebrating ends, the student loan payments begin. Almost 1.8 million members of the class of 2012 are graduating with four-year degrees. 94% of them will be saddled with loans. And here's what's ahead for Generation Debt.
How much debt you have repaid?
Oh, I have over $100,000 worth of student loans to repay.
So about $120,000.
Because I worry for him, I worry for his generation.
94% of the class of 2012 are graduating with student loans. That's up from 45% in 1993. Their average debt, $23,300 per student. Kyle Riggle graduated from Columbia this month, $40,000 in the red.
It is our only option to succeed in America, right? And so it's scary.
As many as 3 in 10 graduates are returning home to live with their parents. Frustration with the cost of higher education has even given birth to a new Occupy movement, where students are encouraged to wear a fake ball and chain during graduation ceremonies.
They're being dragged down by this fiscal weight of this debt that is on their backs no matter what they do.
With young people, a key voting demographic, the cost of college has become a political football. President Obama is pushing to keep interest rates on those loans from jumping up.
Email your member of Congress and tell them, don't double my rates.
Mitt Romney now says he agrees on that point, but weeks earlier he told a prospective college student this.
To shop around and to compare tuition in different places.
This year's class started college in September 2008, the same month investment giant Lehman Brothers collapsed, the beginning of the recession. It's been a tough lesson for these students who say they learned what it takes to survive in the economy, now entering the workforce hungrier with even more determination.
It's just an investment in your future. It sounds cliche, but it's true.
And there's one more piece of bad news, as though you needed any more. If you're a recent college grad who's been lucky enough to land a job, your salary is going to be lower than those of your predecessors. As you can check out on this chart, the hourly wages of entry-level jobs have been decreasing since the year 2000. Entry-level college-educated men between 23 and 29 earned an average of about $21.50 an hour last year. That's a more than 7% drop from just the year 2000. For women, the corresponding number fell to just under $19 an hour. Research shows that by starting at a lower base pay, this crop of graduates may never catch up to their older counterparts. Rich?
All right, Andrew, thank you for that uplifting piece of news.
Sure.
I want to bring in our panel on this to talk about this and so much more. TJ McCormick, conservative radio talk show host. Dominic Carter, political journalist and author. Thomas Schwartz, the president of SUNY Purchase, and you can guess who's the most informed on our first topic here. Without overstating it, could we be at a tipping point here where the affordability or lack thereof of college? I mean, SUNY Purchase, not nearly as bad. We had folks here from SUNY Lawrence, from St. Lawrence here not long ago, and they got not double the tuition, but just about for you, Sarah Lawrence. That is college starting to be an unaffordable option for more and more Americans than probably at any other generation in recent memory?
I don't think we're at a tipping point. I think we're clearly have a national problem, and we have to make a determination as a nation. Where do we want to go? If you looked years ago, I think the Reagan administration did a very creative task in turning public education or higher education from a social contract that it was good for the nation, and they turned the dial slightly and made it into a private good, and therefore the notion became, if it's a private good, you should pay for it in loans rather than grants. And we've gone as a nation from, leaving aside a few Scandinavian countries, from first to I think about 17th. And this is the first time in our history where the cohort of 25 to 34 will have a lower percentage of college graduates than the 25 to 34 cohort before it. And debt is a yoke that will forever be carried by these students, but perhaps more importantly, the number of students who will not go because of the potential debt. And there are studies that show that certain groups, largely Hispanic, culturally are averse to debt. And if you look at the studies, it shows that the Hispanic population, which is a huge percentage of our nation, is lagging in college education. So
I want to get one policy thing out of the way, and then we can get to the root of this, because I know there's a lot of questions that came in before the show that I'm curious your answer to. If these low-interest loans, for all intents and purposes, double if DC doesn't get their act together, given the material impact that's going to have, and use your student body as an example.
Well, I think what happens is that the marginal, it's a basic economic question. Those for whom it is a marginal issue in terms of affordability will be unable to go to college. And every notch in the interest rate will have a response of those who are lower economic. The great American Horatio Alger story will get ever diminished. That's where we're going as a nation.
You know, not dating myself here, but I remember when college was a lot cheaper, and I'm not going back to the 50s or 60s. You go back to the early 90s compared to today, and it seems that the price, tuition's gone through the roof. Why?
Because, well, private education, I'd like to separate private and public. Public education, the states have largely defunded it. And there are some states, and New York is actually a better state than many, where public education is being funded at less than double digits. In other words, the percentage of public support is less than 10%. And it is viewed as discretionary, that certain things come first. And if in a bad economy, public education gets cut, and it actually works exactly the opposite of when it should work. In other words, in a good year, we fund public education, and in a bad year, we cut it. And when people are suffering most, we raise tuition in order to backfill what the state is taking out. And the wealthy privates do a good job of moving money from the rich to the poor. They charge a rack rate that's very high, but then they take that money and they give it to those who need aid. But there are very, very few
because they can
wealthy
afford
colleges.
I mean, they got endowments that they can write, that they can make these kind of decisions.
That's correct.
Public colleges, you don't have
well,
those options,
not
right?
only public, but most of the privates can't afford them. And it's, you know, we have a skewed view of who is a college student. The traditional, so-called traditional 17 to 21 residential college is not who we are as a nation. We have people working part-time. We have people taking care of their families, going to college. They have their own debt. They have a mortgage if they can afford one. And we're burdening them to the point that they can't go. And if you look at the unemployment rate right now, it's 4% among those who have a college education. what are we doing as a nation? We're hurting ourselves in a very basic way.
You know, usually when I talk about Moody's here, it's giving ratings for states' bonds or fiscal health of corporations, et cetera. Moody's, if anybody saw the Times today, they were talking about the health of the fiscal health of the bottom line of colleges. And they gave a negative outlook for a majority of colleges and universities heavily dependent when it comes to just what the president was talking about, tuition as well as state revenue that's drying up coast to coast here. And they said, and quote, tuition levels are at a tipping point, Moody's wrote, adding, we anticipate an ongoing bifurcation of student demand favoring, as you were mentioning, the highest quality and most affordable higher education options, and that leaves a lot of other schools. You know, there's a frustration. People say, oh, the schools are just gouging us. You know, they're killing me here. I think you're at the point where you can't make your number by raising tuition anymore.
Absolutely.
You can just price kids out. So now, what's your choices? Do you have to cut programs? Do you have to turn kids away that need aid? How does it work?
Well, you know, we've been very lucky in that we put money away through this recession. So we haven't had to do that. But I think when you look at most public institutions, they have had to do that. And frankly, most private institutions that don't have big endowments have suffered as well. And the classes are larger. If you have a large class, how do you teach writing to a class of 40 instead of a class of 20? What kind of education can you give in terms of a student being able to stand up and critique when you have 40 instead of 20?
Get a little preview of that in California, right? In the state college system, right?
And now the community colleges in California are filled